Paris, 1794. A cold room, damp walls, a candle. On the table, a document. On the other side of the table, an 8-year-old boy. Someone reads aloud what is written. The quill is placed in his hand. The document accused her of acts that a true mother, as she truly was, could never have been capable of. The boy signs. After that, he never spoke again. That boy's name was Louis Charles. He was the Crown Prince of France, and his mother, the woman he had just accused on a sheet of paper, was Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. On the other side of the prison walls, listening to everything in silence, to understand what they did to him, you need to understand who she was. If stories of power and glory and collapse are your thing, subscribe now, and welcome to AfterThrone. The Hostage. Vienna, 1755. 50 years before the guillotine. In a family of 16 children, one more makes no difference. Maria Antonia grew up loved but forgotten. Her mother, Empress Maria Theresa, had empires to manage and, more important, children to prepare. The older sisters were the valuable pieces on Europe's diplomatic chessboard. Antonia was the spare. So much so that by age 10 she could barely write in German. Then the sisters began to die. Smallpox, illness, accidents. And the spare, the girl no one had prepared, was pushed to the center. France and Austria had been rivals for 200 years. A marriage would seal the peace, and Maria Antonia was the price. In 1770, at 14 years old, she was sent to France. At the border between the two countries, they held a ceremony. She entered a tent as an Austrian. On the other side, she emerged as French. She left behind everything that was hers: clothes, servants, pets. Nothing Austrian could cross the border, not even her name. Maria Antonia became Marie Antoinette. She would never see Austria again. One morning at Versailles, Marie Antoinette needs to get dressed. There is a ritual. Only the lady of highest rank has the right to place the chemise over the queen's head. But while that lady prepares, another enters, of even higher rank. Before she can act, yet another arrives. The chemise passes from hand to hand. Marie Antoinette waits, naked, in the cold of Versailles. She begins to laugh. A nervous laugh, almost hysterical. It was the only way not to cry. She was 14 years old. She was in a foreign country, and she understood that she would never have control over anything, not even her own chemise. The mother. The marriage was not consummated for 7 years. 7 years of pressure, of gossip, of letters from her mother demanding an heir. In that void, Marie Antoinette found what anyone finds who has nothing: excess, parties, fashion, gambling, wigs a meter high, a young woman with unlimited credit and no reason to exist beyond being an ornament. The people called her Madame Deficit. Behind the spending was a woman who couldn't sleep, who wrote letters to a mother who barely replied, who lived in a palace where the only valid currency was appearance. In 1778, her first daughter was born, and something changed that Versailles had never managed to change. Marie Antoinette became a mother. Not the ceremonial mother the manuals prescribed. She wanted to be present. She wanted to breastfeed. 3 more biological children followed, and then the adopted ones. A peasant boy saved from a carriage accident, an African child given to her as a slave and freed by her, daughters of servants who had been left orphaned. 10 children in all. For them, she built a world apart. The Petit Trianon, a farm in the gardens of Versailles where the children ran without protocol, without etiquette, without Versailles. Meanwhile, outside the gardens of the Petit Trianon, France was starving. The people of Paris discovered the farm and called it mockery. The queen playing peasant while they had no bread. June 1789. Louis Joseph, the heir to the throne, dies of tuberculosis. He is 7 years old. Marie Antoinette writes, "The nation seems barely to acknowledge the death of my poor little prince." Because 3 weeks later, the people stormed the Bastille. The revolution did not wait for her to finish grieving. The Trap. October 1789. An enraged crowd marches from Paris to Versailles. Marie Antoinette wakes to the noise. She flees through the corridor connecting her room to the king's, seconds before the crowd invades her chambers, stabs her bed with bayonets, kills 2 guards. The next day, the royal family is taken to Paris, practically as prisoners. The Petit Trianon was left behind forever. In Paris, while the king sank into lethargy, she acted. She planned the escape for months in secret with the help of Count von Fersen, a close friend, perhaps a lover, the only one who would risk everything for her. On the night of June 20th, 1791, the disguised family left Paris in a carriage. Von Fersen drove. While he was in command, there was hope. Then the king made the mistake there was no coming back from. He ordered von Fersen to leave. A foreigner could not be seen helping the royal family escape. It was pride. It was protocol. The same logic of Versailles that had been destroying them all along. Marie Antoinette begged him to stay. The king would not budge. In a small town along the route, a former soldier named Drouet worked as the local postmaster. He looked at the faces of the travelers passing through. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a banknote. The king's face was printed on it. He blocked the road. He sounded the alarm. Louis XVI, stop, in the name of the nation. Marie Antoinette collapsed. The children clung to her. 60 kilometers from the Austrian border. The return to Paris took 4 days at a walking pace. Along the roads, people screamed, spat, threw stones. Marie Antoinette held the children with both arms. Arriving in Paris, the crowd was silent. A man held up a sign. Whoever applauds the king will be flogged. Whoever insults him will be hanged. The silence was the most sophisticated punishment they had ever received. The royal family was 60 kilometers from the border, 1 hour of road. What brought everything down wasn't an army, it was protocol. The pride of a king who couldn't accept help. Do you think he knew what he was doing? Or was he so trapped in the rules that he couldn't even see the way out? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in his place, and whether you would have made a different decision. I want to hear your opinion. And if this story is holding your attention, go ahead and subscribe now. There's so much more to come. The document. The family was locked in the tower of the temple. Thick walls, cold corridors, guards instructed to humiliate at every opportunity. They called the king Louis instead of Your Majesty. They entered the room without knocking. But the family was together, and while they were together, Marie Antoinette kept a routine. She woke early. She taught the children. She read to them. She created within those walls something that resembled normality. January 1793. The revolution had decided that a king could not simply abdicate. He needed to be tried. He needed to be punished. Louis XVI was taken before the Revolutionary Tribunal, the same tribunal that had already condemned hundreds before even hearing them. On January 21st, Louis XVI was guillotined at the Place de la Révolution. The guillotine did not stop with the king. In the months that followed, what the revolution called the Terror consumed France. It is estimated that between 16,000 and 40,000 people were executed. Nobles, clergy, peasants, bourgeois, anyone suspected of hostility toward the Republic. Sometimes on a neighbor's accusation, sometimes with no accusation at all. Robespierre, the man who had engineered the terror, who had signed hundreds of execution orders, was guillotined by that same machine in July 1794. The guillotine that had been invented to kill with equality ended up devouring its own creators. Days after the king's guillotine, a guard entered the cell and placed the husband's wedding ring on the table. Marie Antoinette took the ring. She did not cry in front of the guards. The children were watching. July 1793. In the middle of the night, the Revolutionary Guards entered the cell and took Louis Charles away. He was 8 years old. Marie Antoinette threw herself in front of the door. She begged. The guards pushed her aside. She never saw him again. But she could hear him. Every night, through the thick walls of the tower, she heard her son crying. On the other side of the walls, Louis Charles was being systematically destroyed. They taught him to drink, to curse, to call his mother the Austrian wolf. And then the document arrived, the accusation of sexual abuse against his own mother. A final weapon to destroy not just the queen, but her image forever. The 8-year-old boy signed. October 1793, the Revolutionary Tribunal. Marie Antoinette entered with white hair, a weakened body, hands bound. 15 hours of trial. When the prosecutor read the son's testimony aloud, the room fell silent. She stood up. Every mother in this room knows that is impossible. There was a stir in the gallery. Some women wept. The verdict had been decided before she ever walked in. Guillotine. What happened after? October 16th, 1793. 5 in the morning. Marie Antoinette woke for the last time. She wrote a letter that was intercepted and only found years later in the archives of the Revolution. I die, free of hatred toward those who condemned me. They cut her hair. They bound her hands. They placed her on an open cart, exposed so that everyone could see. The journey to the Place de la Révolution lasted 1 hour. At 12:15, she climbed the steps of the scaffold. She accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. Forgive me, sir. It was not intentional. The guillotine fell. But the story does not end here. Louis Charles remained in the tower of the temple, alone. Food pushed through the bars once a day. No voice, no face, no natural light. For 6 months, the only sign that someone was inside was the sound of the food being dragged back through the bars. When they opened the cell, they found a boy who could barely move. Tuberculosis, infections, a tumor in his knee, unable to stand. On June 8, 1795, Louis Charles died. He was 10 years old. The revolution that had promised to liberate France had locked a prince of 8 years old in a dark hole until he died. Marie-Thérèse remained in isolation for 13 more months without knowing what had happened to her father, her mother, her brother, her aunt. She carved into the wall of her cell, Marie-Thérèse Charlotte is the most unhappy person in the world. Marie Antoinette did not choose the Austria where she was born. She did not choose the France she was sent to. She did not choose the king she married, the palace where she lived, the revolution that destroyed her. The only thing she chose, with determination, against all the protocol of Versailles, was to be a mother. And that is exactly what they used against her in the end. A document, a quill, an 8-year-old prince who never spoke again. There are stories where power destroys those who hold it. This is not one of those stories. This is the story of a woman who never had any power at all and was destroyed just the same. If this story made you think about people who were destroyed by what they loved most, you need to know another one. A man who spent his entire life trying to understand the world. He cataloged every plant, every mineral, every phenomenon in nature. He wrote the greatest encyclopedia of antiquity and died without understanding what was killing him. The wisest man in Rome slept while Pompeii disappeared. You can find the link on screen now and in the first pinned comment. Thank you for staying until the end. If these stories resonate with you, share this with someone who will appreciate it too. Subscribe to the channel and leave your comment below. See you in the next one.